Hello, welcome. Last time I did a tutorial for using Chunk Downloader. We fixed a bunch of issues in the documentation from Epic Games. If you're interested in the video and you want to follow what I'm gonna do today, you can watch my part 2 video of this series. Here's a playlist with the previous two videos. So part 1 is setting up Chunk Downloader and just learning how patches or mods in general work in Unreal. And then part 2 is already setting up a web server and downloading the very same patches or mods, but from the web server and downloading them in game automatically without having to manually copy and paste pack files into the game folder. So that's already working, but it has some bugs. So a couple of things I wanna get fixed today are we're using a static string that points to a folder in the code. I wanna make the code query a text file in the web server and grab the name of that directory from the text file. And the text file is gonna be named content build id.text. The other fix I wanna do is it's always caching the manifest and it's never replacing the file for the new one, even if I update the manifest file in the web server. It doesn't matter what I change, it just never gets the latest version of the file. It still uses the cached version of the manifest. So, in theory, from what I read in the documentation, this first to do item should fix this second one. So, it says somewhere in the documentation that if the URL is different, then the manifest does get updated. So we're gonna confirm that today and see if that's correct. And if it's not correct, then I guess we'll need to find another way to force the cache to purge, which I do know it's possible. It's in the code, the C++ code for Chunk Downloader. I need to get that manifest updating. So I haven't seen the HTTP request stuff to this text file anywhere but a live stream in the Unreal Engine YouTube channel. So let's skip right to the part I need. Content build ID. Okay. So I don't have that file. I need to create it. In the root of the project, I showed you last time that I'm using the whole project as the web server. So I'm just gonna restart my web server. If you wanna know why this command or what I did to get this running, it's in part 2 of my tutorial in my YouTube channel. But basically this just starts a web server on port 80 and I'm giving it some MIME types. Okay, that's running. This should be one directory up from the manifest files. This is my manifest file, but I wanna open it with VS Code. because it lets me see the characters here, and I need to double check that this is a tab, that it's all tabs, not spaces. Okay, the manifest is in patching demo key, so in patching demo CN, I need to create a new file, and it's just a text file, and it has the name of this folder, which is gonna be in the same folder of the content build ID.txt file. So the contents of this file is just this. And now the manifest is here, one directory up, and this needs to be named content build ID. Okay. So let's just confirm that in the web server. This is my web server. I have the content build ID text, and it says patching demo key, which is the same name of the folder where my manifest will be. The manifest has the path to the DLC, this file, which is inside of Windows. Need to open the project, C++ classes. I need to see patching demo game instance. And now I need to grab some code that uses this file. Oh, this is something different to what I thought it was. This platform name that we're using here, the reason for this setting is to set up basically all these naming conventions for the manifest files. My tutorial, we're using Windows, so the manifest file that the chunk downloader is gonna look for will be -Windows. It just tells chunk downloader to use this suffix after build manifest. And this tutorial, they're giving the variant name parameter, dynamically changing the patch platform, meaning in their example they can have multiple different variants of the manifest, and the manifest can point to different URLs. So I'm gonna try just getting the content build ID first, and if that doesn't work, I'm gonna also try where they make it variable. But basically what I need to grab from here is this, the web requests to the content build ID file variable. It's default only patch version URL will be empty first. Let me see if this include fixes this. The response callback. Okay. And then, yeah, this doesn't exist yet. Okay, and we probably need to move this stuff to that, to this function. Request patch version URL. Request get request dash a request dash JSON request public on patch version response http.h. Let's implement this in the CPP after init. So they're basically moving this here to here. But then I will need to move this here. Well, I think we have it. Request goes to this delegate, and this binds this function, and then this function does the rest of the chunk downloader initialization. We'll still using the platform as a fixed string, but it's in the to-do list fix. And then we're loading the cache build ID if it's in the cache. Let me see if they're doing the cache. Yeah, load cached build. So I need to recompile the project. I have live coding disabled and just, recompile. Okay. This is basically the changes to the H file so far. And to the CPP file and included the new file, content build ID. That's what we've done so far today. We have a compilation error. Let's see what's the issue. Log patch undeclared. Log temp display. Printed in console, yes. Printed in editor's log, yes. Oh, log text is color gray. Okay. I didn't know this. This is new for me. Log temp. Declare log category. Oh, they probably declared a log category and I skipped that. I don't think I need to have their same category that they have here. This person just wanted to be able to filter the log. Let's just try to compile again. Another error. Unresolved external symbol FHTTP module. I skipped a couple of dependencies that I need. Chunks.build.cs. Web request stop. Those are new dependencies. And in theory, HTTP JSON. Let's try those dependencies and compile again. So we have another error. Sorry. The type name web request methods couldn't be found in the namespace. Consider adding a reference to that assembly. System.net.requests web request methods has been forwarded to system.net.requests. Oh, why is this here? Let's leave the file as it was. It's just compile successful. Okay, patch version URL. Oh, this is getting added for some reason. Let's see. Compile again. Yeah, so the problem was actually some self-generated stuff in here. I don't know why that's happening. Those are the changes to the CPP file. In total, everything we've done tonight. Those are the changes to H file. Build CS, those are the changes. We created the content build ID.txt file with this content without the plus. This is the formatting for git diff. That's why there's a plus there. But those are the changes from today. So now it compiles successfully. We have the game instance and we have the version URL string, then build ID.txt. So we can just copy and paste this, compile, save. Now let's test this. So I have my now this is the web server, the build, those chunks, save. I'm gonna delete persistent download there, which comes from tests that I did last time. First, let's test if the original file works. Okay. I need to package the project so that it grabs all this new C++ logic. While that keeps packaging, I'm gonna just clear the logs of my web server and restart the web server. I wanna see the request to the text file. The project is packaged. I'm gonna go to the build folder, to the chunks, content, packs. Only chunks 0 should be here for this to work correctly. So I'm gonna just back up chunk 1001, which is the chunk that I'm using as a DLC um, in this tutorial series. So I just cut it from there, and I'm just gonna back this file up in here as the original one, and I'm gonna copy so this is just the backup, but I need to put the file in the web server, Windows, and here. And I want to get the size invite and just make sure that in the manifests it matches. But I'm opening the manifest here to make sure it uses tabs, and I'm just gonna replace the byte size, and this should be working. So just double checking that I removed the persistent download there directory, and it seems like I did. So let's finally test this. Okay, it loaded the file, and let's see the logs of the web server. We should see, yeah, correct. We see the request to the content build ID file, and we see the request to the manifest file, and then the request to the pack file. Now, guys, this is gonna be interesting because now, in theory, we can do something like this. Let me just test if we restart the game, what happens. Switch level init. Switch level patching demo entry. Let's see if it doesn't crash. Okay. Restart level, all good. And if I exit the game, open it again, it's all good. Okay. Restart level. Switch patching demo entry. Okay. All good. Perfect. Everything seems to be working in my GitHub. I just committed everything I've done so far tonight to this branch. This commit 1 minute ago. This is all I've done so far. And then I'm gonna take the opportunity to explain the tags. DLC tutorial 1. This is the commit number where everything I did in the first video is. So part 1, everything in part 1 is in this commit or this tag. Then part 2 that I released 2 days ago, all of the progress in there for that video is in this tag, DLC tutorial 2. And when I release a third video of what I'm recording right now, eventually I'm gonna add a third tag called DLC tutorial 3, and it will include stuff from this branch, or I'll probably just redo it to have a shorter video. if the stream goes too long. And then eventually it will end up in the main branch with the correct tag. Now I wanna just do a quick test and see if the manifest actually gets updated. So I wanna see what happens. Uh, Patching demo CDN. If I have a copy of this file, content build ID dash holidays, and I call this patching demo holidays, and I make a new folder called patching demo holidays, and I copy this manifest. I paste it in the holidays folder. Okay, this just needs to match what it's in the file, in the text file. So if this file says patching demo key and the manifest says patching demo key, then the content build ID that says patching demo key holidays means that the manifest needs to have the same patching demo key holidays build ID, and then in theory I can grab from last build this file in my back folder, and then now in the web server I created patching demo key holidays, and this file build manifest dash platform. The platform, we still have it as a static constant in the code, so we need to name this file dash windows. That's the only reason why it's called like that, because we have windows here. So I can't change that name, but windows, and paste the purple mod there. Then the byte size, it's not matching anymore, so we need to update it. And make sure everything is in tabs. Okay. So, okay, I prepared the files in the web server. I basically created a holidays mod, a DLC just for the holidays. So I'm just making my cube prettier by making it purple just during the holidays. Restart the game, go back to the web server files. Okay. So the game, it's pointing to this file in my web server. We can see it just now did another request to the file, and it's reading the name of this folder from this file. So now if I want, I'm basically, let's say I'm the owner of this game and I'm doing a new DLC. In theory, I don't need to rebuild the game. I just need to, so this file doesn't exist anymore, it's just this one. In theory, I just replace the contents of this file and it should work. So if I just call this holidays, now this should point to this folder instead of this one. And I essentially live patch the game by just replacing the content of this text file. So now it points to patching demo key holidays, and now it grabs this manifest file instead This one should say something like version 2 of the same chunk, different size, same path, same name. Build ID, I don't know if it needs to be the same. Let's try to test this with a different build ID and see what happens. So to make this easy, just exit the game, restart the game. Let's see if it loads the purple cube. Yes, it works. Oh, come on. I spent hours trying to make this work in part 2 of the tutorials and it didn't work. So in theory, if I just change this back to patching demo key and I just switch to the patching demo entry thing, okay, no, it didn't became green. Maybe exit the game. Yeah, so exiting the game makes it work. Okay, yeah, I'm just so happy that it works. So it worked, change the color. We can change it again. It appears we just have to change this to holidays and exit the game. Okay, open the game again and it should be purple. Yeah, it is so funny that it works because I spent so many hours the last week trying to get this working. And I'll tell you what it is. So, and we can actually read it in the documentation. So, it's just that I expect this to work one way, but whoever programmed Chunk Downloader expects it to work another way. So I'll tell you what is so funny about it. Uh, the CPP file update build. Go to definition. If the build ID hasn't changed, there's no work to do. Are you seeing this? So if in the URL to the manifest file, if the build ID, well, I think it's the build ID in the manifest, or is the build ID in the URL? I have no idea. And that's part of the problem. So let's just test that actually. We can do that. Let's keep the same. What am I using now? Let me see. Content build ID. We're using the purple one, holidays. So, okay, we can just copy this and paste it here. Make sure it's all tabs. So I just overwrote the version of the manifest that uses the purple cube with the contents of the manifest that uses the green cube. So I'm gonna exit the game and open the game again. See, the cube stays purple, but it should be green. So I don't think build ID here does anything. Yeah, doesn't do anything. And even if I change this version to a crazy number like that, it doesn't do anything. Right? Because I believe what they refer here to, if the build ID hasn't changed, they're referring not to this build ID, but actually the file structure of the URL. So this doesn't do anything. If you're accessing the same manifest file in the same URL, so it appears it doesn't update the manifest, it doesn't detect as the manifest changed at all if you keep the same URL to access it. So I think this is really nonsensical. How can the file be the same just because the URL is the same? That doesn't make any sense to me. So you'll see that it doesn't change to green until I do patching demo key here and I go and load the game again. See, now it's green because the build ID changed the URL because now we're accessing, yeah, this manifest instead of this manifest. So changing this here or the version doesn't do anything if the URL is the same. So that's just the very first item that I had for today. But it kind of tackles this one as well. We just figure out that URL needs to change as it says in that function. Okay, I just think Epic Games needs to improve this documentation for Chunk Downloader. There's not much out there. It's just strange that there's very little documentation for something so important. I don't think they just expect to for developers to just figure it out, bumping their heads into a wall. So my idea is that this tutorial series at least helps to make this simpler, because it shouldn't be this complicated. At least we now understand why the manifest doesn't get updated, and it's something really silly. So, as a summary, however you design your application, if you want to detect changes in the manifest file, you need to either keep changing the URL every time you update a DLC. For example, you could have something like this. To avoid rebuilding your game, you could have a structure similar to this one, meaning you could have, if this is your CDN, right, your web storage of all the different versions of your DLC, you could call this release numbers. So 1.0 of the DLC, and then 2.0, 3.0, and so on. And then you could have the manifest same name. And this seems to not matter at all, but you could call this patching demo key 1.0, and then you just update your file. But yeah, when you're gonna switch from one release to the other one, you just change the contents of this file. So whenever you're ready to upgrade all your users from the version 1 of the DLC to version 2, you will just write 2.0 here. And this is gonna take them to the folder 2.0, and because the folder changed in the URL where they're trying to read the manifest, because this changes to 2.0, then Chunk Downloader detects that this changed, and then it forces the manifest file to update, even though the manifest file is named the same. And we can actually double check how this works, because I have that question myself too. So let's go to the build Windows chunks saved persistent download there, back cache, and let's see. I think it's cached build manifest. Okay, so that one is the original one, the green cube, because it's the last test that we did. So we have version 1. With all the tests we did, we went back to version 1. That's okay, because we're in patching demo key, which sends the game to this manifest inside of patching demo key folder. But let's say I'm gonna use the holidays version of the DLC again. Sorry, I'm updating the wrong file. It should be this one. Holidays. Again, the binary of the game is always grabbing the content build ID from this file in the web server. So I just patch this live. No rebuilds of the game. So in theory, my gamers are gonna go to this text file, well, to this manifest instead of the original one, and I'm gonna leave this like this. It doesn't matter, doesn't appear to do anything, and I'm gonna revert this to, let's see, the purple one, and this doesn't even need to match anything. So in theory, I just close the game and open the game again. Yeah, build Windows. And let's just pay attention to the cached version. I'm gonna put it below. This is the cached version inside of the game files in persistent download there. When we open the game again, this manifest, which is cached in the game files in persistent download there, it should be updated with the contents of the new manifest for the holidays. So let's see if that happens like that. Okay, so it seems this build ID does need to match because this did get updated, but I think we're having an error due to this not matching. So let's try that again. Yeah, it works. Okay. So this does need to match the folder, I think. The folder name of the content build ID. Yeah. Anyways, this needs to match this. Okay, because this goes to the code. Yeah, this is the exact line where that needs to match. Okay, guys. So the content build ID does need to match the string in the manifest file that says build ID. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then the only way to update the file, the manifest file in the cached version of the game, is to force the URL to change because that's the only way I have gotten it work. Yeah. So the way I see it is whoever programmed the chunk downloader plugin expecting this build ID to change every single release, every single new release of the DLC. So even if you have the same file in the web server and just edit it directly, that doesn't work. So chunk downloader is not meant to be used like that. You're not meant to edit the manifest directly. You're meant to point chunk downloader to a different build ID. I hope that makes sense, but yeah, it's just so weird the way they program this. But guys, just it's not that complicated. It's just the way this works. They're expecting you to don't touch the manifest directly. They're expecting you to update the manifest by pointing your game to a different URL of a new version of that manifest file. Yeah, I'm laughing as I'm describing this. It's just so funny because honestly, this works way better in Unity. It's not that messy. It's not that rigid. In Unity, addressables in Unity are just more flexible. So this makes me wonder if this works for my intended purpose. I don't think my clients are gonna understand that they need to create a new directory per release of their DLC instead of just updating the files. I don't think it's that complicated if I do it, but if I'm expecting people to have the freedom of doing that themselves and managing their own DLC CDN, I don't think that's user friendly for my potential users. So I think this is weird overall. It works once you understand how it works and why, but it's just so weird. Well, the other way is try to purge the cache manually and just change the behavior of chunk downloader if you don't like the default behavior, because this is just the default behavior, but you can change it. So that's actually one thing I have pending for another part of this tutorial series, which is Chunk Downloader has functions to purge the cache, flush cache. That's pending for another video. But yeah, in theory, we can just flush the cache manually, get rid of the cached version of the manifest file. But I see potential issues with this, which is let's say your user lost internet connection and you're forcing your user to flush the cache, and they just can't download the DLC again because, I don't know, they're in the woods and don't have internet, and they took their OS device to the woods. They just can't see that they had downloaded before the trip to the woods, something like that. Yeah, I need to test this flush cache and see what it does. But for today, I think that's enough. I'm gonna add this as a to-do item in my to-do list. Oh, yeah, at least we got it working by changing the URL. So yeah, just as a summary, guys, if you're trying to implement Chunk Downloader, just make sure that when you update your DLC, you're changing the path of the manifest file. If you don't change it, your users are not gonna be getting the latest version of the manifest file. It's gonna stay in the whatever version they have if the URL is the same, unless you somehow clear the cache by force. So yeah, make sure this changes the build ID in the URL. If it doesn't change, no updates to your DLC. And basically, don't overwrite manifest files. You're supposed to release a new version instead of overwriting the same file. So you're supposed to create a completely new file in a completely new folder in your CDN. And that's the way the Chunk Downloader developers in Epic games are expecting you to do this. If you understand those concepts, then this is not as complicated as you may think it is. And that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in.